just get situated here. Welcome back. You've, I assume, come to hear a story. Well, I got it right here. And, you'll notice it's an awfully thick book. But, oh dear, I've gone to the wrong page. There we go. Okay, the first story I'm going to be reading is called What the Old Man Does Is Always Right. I read it and I got a chuckle out of it. Also because I'm an old man and I am not always right, so I thought this was humorous. Okay, here goes. I will tell you a story that was told me when I was a little boy. Every time I thought of this story, it seemed to me more and more charming. For it is with stories, as it is with many people, they become better as they grow older. I have no doubt that you have been in the country and seen a very old farmhouse with a thatched roof, and the mosses and small plants growing wild upon it. There is a stork's nest on the ridge of the gable, for we cannot do without the stork. That's a bird. Used to bring babies. Now they're just lazy. I'm just kidding. I don't know what they do. The walls of the house are sloping and the windows are low. The only one of the latter is made to open. The baking oven sticks out of the wall like a great knob. An elder tree hangs over the palings, and beneath its branches at the foot of the paling is a pool of water, in which a few ducks are disporting themselves. There is a yard dog, too, who barks at all comers. Just such a farmhouse as this stood in the country lane, and in it dwelt an old couple, a peasant and his wife. Small as their possessions were, they had one article they could not do without, and that was a horse, which contrived to live upon the grass which it found by the side of the high road. The old peasant rode into the town upon this horse, and his neighbors often borrowed it of him, and paid for the loan of it by rendering some service to the old couple. After a time they thought it would be as well to sell the horse, or exchange it for something which might be more useful to them. But what might this something be? "You know best, old man," said the wife. "It is a fair day today, so ride into town and get rid of the horse for money, or make a good exchange. Whichever you do will be the right to me, so ride to the fair." And she fastened his neckerchief for him, for she could do better than he could, and she could also tie it very prettily in a double bow. She also smoothed his hat round and round with the palm of her hand and gave him a kiss. Then he rode away upon the horse that was to be sold or bartered for something else. Yes, the old man knew what he was about. The sun shone with great heat, and not a cloud was to be seen in the sky. The road was very dusty, for a number of people, all going to the fair, were driving, riding, or walking upon it. There was no shelter anywhere from the hot sunshine. Among the rest, a man came trudging along and driving a cow to the fair. The cow was as beautiful a creature as any cow could be. "She gives good milk, I am certain," said the peasant to himself. That would be a very good exchange, the cow for the horse. "Hullo there, you with the cow," he said. "I tell you what, I dare say a horse is of more value than a cow, but I don't care for that. A cow will be more useful to me, so if you like, we'll exchange." "To be sure I will," said the man. Accordingly, the exchange was made and the matter was settled. The peasant might have turned back, for he had done the business he came to do. But having made up his mind to go to the fair, he determined to do so, if only to look at it. So on he went to the town with his cow. Leading the animal, he strode on sturdily, and after a short time overtook a man who was driving a sheep. It was a good fat sheep with a fine fleece on its back. "I should like to have that fellow," said the peasant to himself. "There's plenty of grass for him by our palings, and then in the winter he could keep in him and in the winter we could keep him in the room with us. Perhaps it would be more profitable to have a sheep than a cow. Shall I exchange?" The man with the sheep was quite ready, and the bargain was quickly made, and then our peasant continued his way on the high road with his sheep. Soon after this he overtook another man who had come into the road from a field, and was carrying a large goose under his arm. "What a heavy creature you have there," said the peasant. "It has plenty of feathers and plenty of fat. It would look well tied to a string, or paddling in the water at our place. That would be very useful to my old woman. She could make all sorts of profits out of it. How often she has said this. If now we only had a goose. Now here is an opportunity, and if possible I will get it for her. Shall we exchange? I will give you my sheep for your goose, and thanks in the bargain." The other had not the least objection, and accordingly the exchange was made, and our peasant became possessor of the goose. By this time he had arrived very near the town. The crowd on the high road had been gradually increasing, and there was quite a rush of men and cattle. The cattle walked on the path and by the palings, and at the turnpike gate. They even walked into the toll-keeper's potato field, where one fowl was strutting about with a string tied to its leg for fear it should take fright at the crowd and run away and get lost. The tail feathers of the fowl were very short, and winked with both eyes, and looked very cunning as it said, "Cluck, cluck." What were the thoughts of the fowl as it said this I cannot tell you, but directly our good man saw it, he thought, "Why, that's the finest fowl I ever saw in my life. It's finer than our parson's brood hen, upon my word. I should like to have that fowl. Fowls can always pick up good grains that lie about, and almost keep themselves. I think it would be a good exchange if I get it for my goose. Shall we exchange?" he asked the toll-keeper. "Exchange," repeated the man. "Well, it would not be a bad thing." And so they made an exchange. The toll-keeper at the turnpike gate kept the goose, and the peasant carried off the fowl. Now he had really done a great deal of business on his way to the fair, and he was hot and tired. He wanted something to eat and a glass of ale to refresh himself, so he turned his steps to an inn. He was just about to enter when an ostler came out, and they met at the door. The ostler was carrying a sack. "What have you in that sack?" asked the peasant. "Rotten apples," answered the ostler, "a whole sack full of them. They will do to feed the pigs with." "Why, what will be a terrible waste," he replied. "I should like to take them home to my old woman. Last year the old apple tree by the grass plot only bore one apple, and we kept it in the cupboard till it was quite withered and rotten. It was always property, my old woman said, and here she would see a great deal of property, a whole sackful. I should like to show them to her." "What will you give me for the sackful?" asked the ostler. "What will I give? Well, I will give you my fowl in exchange." So he gave up the fowl and received the apples, which he carried into the parlor. He leaned the sack carefully against the stove, and then went to the table. But the stove was hot, and he had not thought of that. Many guests were present, horse dealers, cattle drovers, and 2 Englishmen. The Englishmen were so rich that their pockets quite bulged out and seemed ready to burst, and they could bet too, as you shall hear. Hiss! Hiss! What could that be by the stove? The apples were beginning to roast. "What is that?" asked one. "Why, what do you know?" said our peasant, and then he told them the whole story of the horse which he exchanged for a cow, and all the rest of it, all down to the apples. "Well, your old woman will give it to you when you get home," said one of the Englishmen. "Won't there be a noise?" "What? Give me what?" said the peasant. "Why, she will kiss me and say, 'What the old man does is always right.'" "Let us lay a wager on it," said the Englishman. "We'll wager you a ton of coin gold, 100 pounds to 100 weight. "No, a bushel will be enough," replied the peasant. "I can only set a bushel of apples against it, and I'll throw myself and my old woman into the bargain. That will pile up the measure, I fancy." Done, taken, and so the bet was made. Then the landlord's coach came to the door, and the 2 Englishmen and the peasant got in, and away they drove, and soon arrived and stopped at the peasant's hut. "Good evening, old woman." "Good evening, old man. I've made the exchange." "Ah, well, you understand what you're about," said the woman. Then she embraced him and paid no attention to the strangers, nor did she notice the sack. "I got a cow in exchange for the horse." "Oh, thank heaven," she said. "Now we shall have plenty of milk and butter and cheese on the table. That was a capital exchange." Yes, but I exchanged the cow for a sheep. Ah, better still, cried the wife. You always think of everything. We have just enough pasture for a sheep. Use milk and cheese, woolen jackets, and stockings. The cow cannot give all these, and her hair only falls off. How you think of everything. But I changed away the sheep for a goose. Then we shall have roast goose to eat this year. You dear old man, you are always thinking of something to please me. This is delightful. We can let the goose walk about with a string tied to her leg, so she will be fatter still before we roast her. But I gave away the goose for a fowl. A fowl! Well, that was a good exchange, replied the woman. The fowl will lay eggs and hatch them, and we shall have chickens. We shall soon have a whole poultry yard. Oh, this is just what I was wishing for. Yes, but I exchanged the fowl for a sack of shriveled apples. What? I really must give you a kiss for that, exclaimed my wife. My dear good husband, now I'll tell you something. Do you know, almost as soon as you left me this morning, I began to think of what I could give you nice for the supper this evening, and then I thought of fried eggs and bacon with sweet herbs and eggs and bacon. Oh, well, I had the eggs and bacon, but I wanted the herbs, so I went over to the schoolmaster's. I knew they had plenty of herbs, but the schoolmistress is very mean, although she can smile so sweetly. I begged her to lend me a handful of herbs. Lend, she exclaimed. I have nothing to lend. Nothing at all grows in our garden, not even a shriveled apple. I could not even lend you a shriveled apple, my dear woman, but now I can lend her 10, or a whole sackful, which I am very glad of. It makes me laugh to think about it. And then she gave him a hearty kiss. Well, what do you know about that? Said both the Englishmen. Always going down the hill and all yet always merry. It's worth the money to see it. So they paid 100 weight of gold to the peasant, who, whatever he did, was not scolded, but kissed. Yes, it always pays best when your wife sees and maintains that her husband knows best, and whatever he does is right. That is a story which I heard when I was a child, and now you have heard it too, and know that what the old man does is always right. What a delightful story. I'm glad you stuck around. It was quite a mouthful. And bless me, I'm a little bit tired now. I think I'll retire to another room and just have a rest, maybe. Well, I'll see you next time. And like I said, let me know what stories you want to hear. If you remember any of my dear brother Hans's stories, I'd love to read them to you. They're just so delightful. And yes, I'm glad you could come stay with me a while. See you later. It's time for me to take a rest.